There was a time when her home had been filled with sound, the clatter of dishes, laughter drifting down the hallway, her husband humming softly as he read the newspaper. Now, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock she often forgot to wind. Evelyn had lived alone for nearly 12 years. She told herself she had grown used to the quiet, but that wasn't true. Silence was something she endured, not something she accepted. It filled every corner of her home like fog, wrapping around her until she could barely feel her own voice anymore. Sometimes she tried to fill it, turning on the television, the radio, anything. But those sounds only reminded her of what was missing. The warmth of a real conversation, the comfort of a voice that knew hers. When the evening fell and the neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, her house became a world of stillness. And though she rarely said it aloud, she often thought the same thing as she turned off the lamp by her bed. No one would notice if I disappeared. Then she would close her eyes and try not to cry. Every night before bed, Evelyn turned on the small lamp on her nightstand. Its glow was soft and golden, barely enough to light the room, but she couldn't bear the darkness. She told herself it was habit, but deep down she knew the truth. That little light was her way of telling the world she was still there. That even if no one came, even if no one called, she existed, quietly, steadily, beneath that single glow. Sometimes she sat awake for hours, watching how the light fell on the floor, how it flickered gently against the wallpaper. It was almost like company, a silent witness to her loneliness. She whispered prayers in that glow, short, halting ones. "Lord, are you awake too?" she would murmur with a faint smile. "Because I can't sleep." There was no answer, of course, only the soft hum of stillness. Yet she felt something sacred in the ritual, as though keeping the light on was her way of saying, "I'm still waiting." And though she didn't know it, someone else was too. His photograph stood on the dresser beside her bed, the same place it had always been. He was smiling in it, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes kind and bright. She touched the edge of the frame every night before lying down, tracing his face with her fingers as if memorizing it again. "Good night, Harold," she whispered softly. "I hope you're still keeping things tidy up there." Sometimes she laughed quietly at her own words. Other times she cried without sound. She knew he couldn't hear her, but speaking his name made the silence more bearable. It made her remember that she had once been part of something warm, something alive. But every word she said seemed to echo back at her, the laughter bouncing off empty walls, the tears falling into still air. She often asked God if Harold could see her, if he knew how much she still missed him. But heaven seemed so far away, unreachable, like a window she could see through but never open. Still, she kept talking, because not talking felt like letting go. And she wasn't ready for that. During the day, Evelyn wore her composure like a well-pressed dress. She smiled when the mailman greeted her. She waved to neighbors. She even joked about her forgetful old age when she misplaced her glasses again. But when the sun slipped behind the trees, something inside her shifted. The brave face she wore all day slowly cracked under the weight of the evening. She would sit on her bed, hands clasped, staring at the walls that had heard every version of her. The strong woman, the lonely widow, the child of God who sometimes wondered if her father had gone silent too. The ache wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with sobs or shouts. It was steady, quiet, like a bruise that never healed. And yet, even in her tears, she couldn't stop whispering small prayers. "Please see me, Lord. Please don't forget me." She didn't ask for miracles. She didn't even ask for joy. She only wanted to know she wasn't alone in that room, but heaven stayed silent, or so it seemed. It had been another long day, the kind that began in silence and ended the same way. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, her back hunched slightly, her hands resting on her knees. The small lamp beside her cast a fragile circle of light. Her Bible lay open, but the words swam before her eyes. She tried to read, to pray, but all she could do was sigh. Finally, she closed the book and pressed her palms together. "Lord," she whispered, her voice trembling, "if you see me, Please don't stay far." The room held its breath. She half expected nothing to happen. She was used to nothing happening. But still, she spoke again. "I don't ask for much, Jesus. I don't need health or riches. I just need you to know. I'm lonely." Her voice broke on the last word. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent, unforced. It wasn't a grand prayer, not eloquent or long. It was small and raw and honest. But sometimes that's all heaven needs to open its doors. And though she couldn't hear it yet, her whisper had been heard. She waited, still kneeling, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned pale. But no warmth came, no light, no sudden comfort. Just silence. It felt cruel at first. "I knew it," she thought, lowering her head. "Even God has forgotten my name." Her tears came faster, her shoulders shaking as the quiet pressed down like a weight. She lifted her head once more, looking around the room, the Bible, the photograph, the lamp, the same walls that had kept her prayers secret for years. Nothing moved. For a moment she wondered if faith was only a story she had told herself to keep from breaking. She whispered bitterly through her tears, "If you're listening, say something." But the stillness remained. And yet, beneath her grief, something lingered. It wasn't an answer, not yet, but the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It was heavy, like a pause before a reply. Something in her heart trembled. She didn't know it yet, but the silence was not rejection. It was the sound of God drawing near. It happened suddenly without warning. One moment she was whispering, the next she was weeping. Not the polite tears she allowed herself before, but deep, unrestrained sobs. It was as though every ache she had buried over the years, every goodbye, every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, came rushing to the surface. She buried her face in her hands and cried until her chest hurt. There was no point in stopping. The tears were her truth now. "I can't do this anymore," she said between breaths. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay." Her voice broke into the still air. "I just want someone to see me, to remember me." The tears didn't stop for a long time. The lamp flickered, and her breathing grew uneven. The whole room seemed to pulse with her pain. But then, when her body was too tired to cry anymore, when she could only sit there shaking, empty, something began to shift. It was as if heaven itself leaned close and said, "Now." At first it was faint, just a few notes in her mind, fragile as a whisper. Then the words followed, broken but clear. "What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear." Her lips began to move before she even realized it. The melody trembled, cracked, but it was real. The song had been her mother's favorite. She used to sing it as a girl, back when faith was simple and joy came easily. She hadn't thought of it in years. Now, in her small room, her voice rose through the tears, soft, trembling, but filled with something ancient and sacred. As she sang, the air itself seemed to change. The loneliness that had filled the room for so long began to loosen its grip. Her sobs slowed, her breathing steadied, and somewhere between one verse and the next, she felt it, a presence, warm and tender, settling over her like a blanket. The words slipped from her lips once more, almost as a whisper. "Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer." And for the first time in years, her tears no longer fell from pain, but from recognition. Evelyn stopped singing mid-verse, startled by something she couldn't explain. It wasn't sound, it was presence. The air itself felt different, as though it had softened. The weight of the room lifted, and the silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, began to feel alive. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around, half afraid to move. Nothing had changed. The lamp still glowed, the shadows still rested on the walls, but deep inside her she knew she was no longer alone. Her tears stilled, her trembling stopped. A gentle warmth began spreading through her chest, slow and steady, filling the hollow spaces that had ached for so long. She didn't imagine it. This wasn't memory or emotion. This was him, the same Jesus she had called to in the dark, was here, not distant, not silent, not unreachable. and though she couldn't see him, she knew he was near, nearer than breath, nearer than thought, nearer than loneliness. Her heart whispered, almost without sound, "You came," and the stillness seemed to answer, not in words, but in peace. The warmth deepened, wrapping around her like light that could be felt. Her pulse slowed, her body relaxed, and in that holy stillness something stirred inside her, gentle, like the first wind after rain. Then she heard it, not through her ears, but through her soul. "I am here." The words were soft, not commanding, not distant, but alive, full of love so vast it broke something open inside her. Her eyes filled again, but this time with tears of awe. "Jesus," she whispered. "I am here," the voice repeated, not from the air, but from the center of her being. It wasn't imagination, it wasn't memory, it was relationship reborn. She pressed her hand over her heart, trembling. Every part of her that had felt forgotten was suddenly found. Every doubt she had whispered was now silenced by those 3 words. She didn't ask questions, she didn't need proof. She only bowed her head and whispered through the tears, "Thank you." And the silence around her glowed with answer, holy, steady, eternal. Evelyn sat completely still, her palms resting on her knees, her eyes closed. The tears still came, but they no longer carried despair. They felt like healing, like something broken inside her was being mended with every drop. She didn't see visions or angels, but she felt as though someone had knelt beside her. It was so real that she could almost sense his robe brushing against her skin, his hand resting gently over hers. Every ache, physical, emotional, spiritual, began to loosen its grip. The same heart that had asked why for so many years now whispered, "It's enough." There were no words from heaven, only presence, and that was more than enough. For the first time in years, her room didn't feel like a place of endings. It felt like sanctuary, sacred ground. In the glow of her small lamp, Evelyn leaned back, closed her eyes and rested, not in loneliness, but in love. When morning came, it felt different. The sunlight that entered through her window seemed warmer, almost golden, the same walls, the same furniture, yet everything looked new. Evelyn sat up slowly, her body sore but her spirit light. Her first thought was not of loneliness, but of gratitude. "You stayed," she whispered. "You really stayed." The air carried a peace that lingered from the night before. The silence was still there, but it no longer hurt. It was filled with presence, like the echo of love that doesn't fade with dawn. As she made her tea, she caught her reflection in the kitchen window. Her eyes looked softer, alive again. She smiled faintly and said to herself, "He answered." And in her heart she heard it again, not in sound, but in certainty. I never stopped listening. The sorrow that once defined her life had shifted. It hadn't vanished, but it had been transformed into something holy, a space where Jesus himself had come to dwell. Evelyn was still sipping her tea when she heard a gentle knock at the door. She frowned slightly. Visitors were rare, especially this early. She shuffled to the entrance, smoothing her robe, and opened the door. Standing there was a young woman from her church, Emily, the pastor's daughter. She looked nervous, holding a small paper bag. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," she said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just felt I should come by and bring you something." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "For me?" Emily smiled, nodding. "I was baking this morning, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. I don't know why, but I felt the Lord tell me to visit." Evelyn's throat tightened. For a moment she couldn't speak. She simply opened the door wider and said, "Come in, dear." The house that had so long been filled with silence, now filled with the sound of gentle conversation, soft laughter, the clinking of cups, 2 hearts meeting across generations. And as they sat together, Evelyn realized something extraordinary. Jesus had answered her through this simple, unexpected kindness. Before leaving, Emily asked, "Would you like to pray together?" Evelyn nodded. They joined hands, the young, steady one and the old, trembling one, and bowed their heads. Emily began softly, "Lord, thank you for Mrs. Hayes. Thank you for reminding me to come today." But as she spoke, her voice faltered. Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been feeling lost lately," she whispered. "I didn't tell anyone, but I've been praying that you'd show me you're still near." Evelyn squeezed her hand gently, tears filling her own eyes. And in that moment, they both felt it, the same warmth, the same peace that had visited Evelyn the night before. It filled the room again, quiet but powerful, surrounding them like invisible light. Neither spoke for several minutes. They simply sat there, hands joined, tears falling freely. It wasn't sorrow this time. It was love. Two hearts healed at once by the same gentle presence. When Emily finally stood to leave, she whispered through tears, "I think Jesus wanted me to know he answers prayers." Evelyn smiled through her own. "He wanted me to remember that too." The days that followed were different. The light in Evelyn's home seemed to linger longer. Each morning, as she made her tea, she hummed softly. Old hymns, forgotten tunes, melodies she hadn't dared sing in years. Her voice cracked at times, but that only made it sweeter. Neighbors began to notice the change. "You sound happy, Mrs. Hayes," one said. Evelyn smiled gently and replied, "I'm not lonely anymore. I have company every night now." When asked what she meant, she only smiled deeper, the kind of smile that holds secrets too holy to explain. In the evenings, she opened her window, letting the cool air in, and sang softly to the quiet street. The same hymn that had come to her in tears now flowed like a prayer of victory. "What a friend we have in Jesus." The song drifted through the night, gentle and true, carrying with it the story of a heart once broken, now mended by mercy. One morning, while folding her laundry, the phone rang. The sound startled her. It had been so long since it had rung for her. She answered, her voice cautious. "Hello? Mom?" a familiar voice said on the other end. It was her daughter, Ruth. "I hope I'm not calling too early." Evelyn's knees almost gave way. "Ruth, oh, sweetheart, it's never too early." There was a pause. Then Ruth spoke softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know why, but I woke up this morning and just needed to hear your voice." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "You couldn't have known," she said quietly, "but I've been praying for that very thing." They talked for nearly an hour, about simple things, ordinary things, and the sacred thing of just being together again. When the call ended, Evelyn sat holding the receiver against her chest, her eyes lifted heavenward. "You answer in ways I never expect, Lord," she whispered. And in the stillness that followed, the silence smiled. It began quietly, like a breeze moving through a long-closed room. One afternoon, while she was watering her plants, a small bird landed on the windowsill, tilting its head as if to study her. It chirped once, twice, and hopped closer. Evelyn chuckled softly. "Well, hello there, brave little one." The sound of her own laughter startled her. It had been years since it had come so naturally. That night, as she prepared for bed, she smiled, remembering it. How light it felt, how good it was to feel something other than ache. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, "for laughter that doesn't hurt." In the following days, she noticed it happening more often. Small bursts of joy, unexpected and pure, when she misplaced her glasses for the 10th time, when she burned her toast, when the neighbor's cat stole her sandwich from the porch. These little moments weren't miracles in the way she used to imagine them, but each one felt like a quiet reminder. Life had returned, and deep inside she knew Jesus hadn't just answered her prayer for comfort. He had given her joy again. The way she prayed changed. Once her prayers had been full of longing, heavy with questions, soaked with tears, but now they were simple, tender, full of quiet gratitude. Each morning she began with the same words, "Good morning, Jesus." Then each night, as she turned off her lamp, she whispered, "Thank you for staying." She no longer begged for answers. She no longer searched for signs. She had learned that his silence had never meant absence, only closeness too deep for sound. The loneliness that had once felt endless had become her meeting place with him, the sacred room where he had entered her pain and turned it into peace. And sometimes, before sleep, she would smile softly and say, "You really do answer, don't you?" And though no voice replied, she always felt it, that familiar, holy stillness that had first whispered in her darkest night. It was an ordinary evening. The lamp glowed softly beside her bed, her Bible open to Psalm 23. Evelyn read the words slowly, savoring them like a final lullaby. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." She smiled faintly. Her hands trembled as she closed the book. "You've been good to me, Lord," she whispered. "Better than I deserved. Thank you for finding me when I was lost, for answering when I thought you were silent." She lay back against her pillow, the golden light washing over her face. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat gentle and steady. She prayed one last time, not for rescue, but for rest. "I'm ready, Jesus," she said softly. "If you want me home, I'm ready." And as the lamp flickered, she felt the same warmth she had felt that night long ago, the unmistakable presence that once entered her sorrow. Only this time, it didn't come to comfort her pain. It came to carry her home. The house was silent again, but not with loneliness. Her lamp still glowed softly, casting light over her peaceful face. There was no trace of struggle, only serenity, the look of one who had fallen asleep in the arms of someone she trusted completely. If anyone had been there, they might have felt it, the still air shimmering with something unseen, something holy, the faintest echo of a whisper. "You called, and I came." Evelyn opened her eyes to light, not lamplight but eternal light. She saw him smiling, reaching for her hand. The same Jesus who had entered her small room years ago now stood before her in glory. "Welcome home, beloved," he said, and in that moment she knew. Every tear, every prayer, every night of silence had been worth it. The one she had longed for had always been near. Now she would never be apart from him again.